this was sometime in the 90s, all right? I had a friend of mine named Travis Ring. We're still friends. And Travis was a big dude, compared to me. Almost all my friends were a big dude or a big dudette, right? But in terms of height, right? And at the time, Travis had like the beard and the long hair. And I remember we were at a club once. He was also an ex-jarhead like me. We were at the club once, and this attractive-looking black woman comes up to him and says, you look just like Jesus Christ. So my description of is just imagine Jesus Christ on steroids, right? We're talking white Jesus Christ, not the actual, Middle Eastern Jewish Jesus Christ who, nobody wants to talk about, right? So he, after studying with me a little bit, we train informally, backyards, basement, my backyard, his backyard, our friend Nicole's backyard, right? And at Mercer County Community College sometimes. And he got pretty good. We got pretty darn good, right? And he was my lab rat. I would try out techniques I'd learned, techniques I'd seen, things in the magazines. That was when Panther Videos was really popular. So, anytime I got a little extra money, I'd get a Panther video or trade a copy of mine for someone else's. And I was just constantly experimenting. It was a fun period of my life because I had several students, big guys. One, Travis, really big. Paul, not as big, but still about the same height. Guy named Manny, a little shorter, leaner, ripped, a little more agile. And Nicole, very heavy-set woman, about my age, went to high school with her. My friend Brad, who's like, more of a socialite guy. And a few people would dabble in it here and there. But, they got in stuff. They got in beefs. Some were serious, some were not. Travis started bouncing, and seems like every week or every other week he'd be like, hey, something happened at the club, I had to intervene. This technique works really great, this one not so much. This one's overkill, this one really sucks, nothing happened. And we would just deconstruct it. We'd workshop it, and I'd try to figure out what happened. And sometimes he'd be like, hey, it works now, but it doesn't work like it was originally presented. And I'm like, all right, that's going to go in my notebook, right? It was a great learning period for me. And I wasn't the one getting punched, right? Punched at. I must say, none of my guys had a single punch landed on them, a single successful takedown happened to them ever during that time period. All right. So something was right. I called the system I was developing at the time Silum Do, probably a very common name, the way of Southern Shaolin, because I was really in love with the Southern Shaolin I was learning, but I had my karate, my taekwondo, and dips and dabs of a whole bunch of stuff that I'd picked up along the way, and was developing my own method. Kind of had to. I was independent. So we were hanging out with a friend of his who was also a bouncer, a little bit shorter than Travis, more of a heavy-set guy. Not necessarily a bad guy. He liked to drink. He liked to eat. He's very much a Jersey boy. I mean, he's like not a lick of Irish in him. He's like, I'm going to get in touch with my Irish roots because it's St. Paddy's Day, and he drank the green beer and pretend to be Irish. He just liked to have a good time, right? And I think he was fond of the hammer fist, right? So anyway, we were hanging out with him and a couple girls. I don't think any of the girls were dating any of the guys in the group, but I think Travis's friend was semi-interested in this one girl. And, they were subject of martial arts comes up. Why not? You've got two martial artists, one of which is a bouncer and another bouncer there. It's going to come up, right? And, I think Travis was showing the girl how her wrist escape and all that. And, for some reason I said, I think I should have just stayed out of the conversation and the night would have been less eventful, right? But we were at this bar, a bar/restaurant, and I mentioned to her, when somebody grabs your hand, try to expand your hand when they grab you because it actually thickens the wrist. And then when you begin to move, you can move against the thumb, and get yourself out of grips. And she wasn't a skinny girl, so she had a little bit of heft to her. And I think she could have made the technique work. And then dude, let's just call him dude, comes up and he's like, well, what if I do this, right? And it grabs my hands. He gets me in a two-handed grip, palms facing down, right? And I realize, there's some intent here. He's got a kind of look in his eyes, and I'm thinking he, wants to show me up. And part of me is like, well, you don't want to be shown up. But you don't necessarily want to escalate. So I said, well, and I'm moving my hands this slow. And I'm just, trying. Again, this was an Aikido principle, really, that I'd read about. And at that time, I hadn't formally studied Aikido Jiu-Jitsu or Aikido, right? Just observations and a demonstration and reading books and magazine articles. And as I'm moving against his thumb, we're at that point where he cannot possibly maintain his grip. And all I have to do is turn and kind of press, and I'm out of his grip. But I'm just talking real slow. And see, as you can see right here, when I get to this point against the thumbs, you don't have any and then he let go, and I felt a shift because this is tactile, right? And I had Tai Chi training, and I, learned more about tactile sensitivity. And I felt him move, and even as he cocked his left elbow back, my hand was in a defensive position, right? And what I did was I reached out like this and caught that elbow, right? And checked it, right? And folks, before I knew what was happening, right, my hand turned over and I used what was called a willow leaf dragon or northern dragon palm. You probably see it in Bagua, where it's like instead of this type of claw, it's like this. This is stiff enough that you could actually stab with it, right? And so, pop! I just popped him in the throat real quick, right? Pop! And then, well, you don't just hit a big guy and stop. That is dumb, especially, and I was in a Sanchin stance when I did it. Literally, like a perfect Sanchin stance. Technique is a lot like the presenting a tablet or po bai, as it's called in Kung Fu, and in Sanchin Kata, you do the one palm up, one palm low, fingertips up, fingertips down, right? You do that technique. But what this turned into a clasp on his Adam's apple, and I held his testicles in my hand, right? And he just froze. And he's like, I just wanted to. And again, at this point, I was a little mad, but I was kind of coming back to my senses. I'm like, holy shit. So I detached. I threw two controlled elbows, like soof, soof, just kind of grazing the tip of his nose. And then I re-grabbed him again because I didn't want him to punch me. And I said, I want to let you go. And I was just kind of looking at him, and I'm looking over at Travis. He's out of his seat, and he's looking past us. And I look over there, and there's a couple of bouncers, and Travis is kind of like looking at them, kind of like letting them know, don't intervene. I think that was the message he was giving. I'm not 100% sure. It was a long time ago. I might have had a couple drinks. I drank at the time. And I slowly backed off. And he sat back down, and I sat back down, and it was kind of an uncomfortable night. And then I rode back with Travis. Then as now, I don't drive. I never got into the habit. I remember we talked about it, and I tried to justify myself, and I don't know if I sounded any good, but I was just trying to say, like, I thought he was going to hit me with that elbow. Like, I read some intent. He probably wasn't going to hit me hard, or maybe he would have just made the motion, and, part of me doesn't like being shown up. I don't want to willingly take a hit just for no reason. Just, I want peace, but I don't want to be, made a fool of. So, yeah. Is that a self-defense situation? Kind of. Probably a very preventable one and an avoidable one. I don't really go to bars now. And I don't drink anymore. Was it a street fight? No. Could I count it as a bar fight? I think we're stretching it. Let's call it a bar incident. This also illustrates a couple of important points in self-defense. If you're in a bar, things can escalate. Whenever there are male and female dynamics involved, any interaction you have with the female will affect the other males in the group, right? And that could cause potential conflicts. And I did not have an interest in this woman. She was not my type. Mentally, physically, facially, spiritually. But, again, there's people in the group. You want to interact with everybody in the group, right? I go into teacher mode fast and often forget where I am. I'm saying that's a flaw, right? Although, a lot of teachers are like, everywhere is a coon. Everything is a dojo. Jackie Chan and Karate Kid. Everything is kung fu. So it is an attitude we have, I've often been in that situation where I'm hanging out with friends in college, later in life, martial art colleagues, even here, with friends here, where I'll start talking about an aspect of martial arts or a combat sport or something, and I'll convince my friend to stand up and we'll do techniques there and in public, right? And I'm 53, but I still get enthusiastic like I'm, a 15-year-old about this. I still love it. So, dragon technique and Sanchin, right? If you've ever done Sanchin kata, even the Chinese versions, the Weijiru versions, you will see that double palm technique. And the double palm technique can be a double claw technique. It can be a double spear hand technique, a double fist technique. It actually does have a use, and it's useful in clinch range during the clinch, okay? So that's all I want to say about that. I'm just sharing it because it might be useful reference, because many of the newer batches of martial artists are not aware that there are other techniques out there that are very different than what you will see on television in the UFC. They're not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They're not boxing. They're not Muay Thai, right? They're not freestyle wrestling. They're very different. They were created by people that thought very different. They move different, and they target different, but they are very effective, okay? When I grabbed him and applied a little bit more than moderate pressure on his testicle and Adam's apple, he froze. Like, I could tell that he wanted to move, He could not move. Things were shutting down. His brain wasn't knowing what to deal with it. There was pain above, pain below, and it was short-circuiting him. Okay? And I've heard of this technique being used against some very big people. One of my instructors in the Shaolin style, the Northern Shaolin style, used it in public at a tournament when a student had a temper tantrum, right? And that student was big. All right. So, you all have a good night.